It was Friday the 13th, and perhaps the unluckiest day ever for the Uruguayan rugby team aboard the plane. Everyone on the team had to contribute in order to survive, even the dead. The Uruguayan rugby team were on a charter flight to Santiago, Chile on October 13, 1972. They were on a Fairchild F-227 holding 45 passengers. Most were only 17 to 19 years old. At a cruising speed of about 230 miles per hour, the bottom of the plane struck the mountains at around 12,000 feet, right where the wings attached to the body. First the wings for the crash, 33 were alive, although many had suffered gruesome injuries, leaving only 2 passengers completely unharmed. 2 were sucked out of the airplane during the crash. Their bodies were... Nando Parado, who became one of the leaders of the group, had fractured his skull severely. Roberto Canessa and Gustavo Zerbino, both medical students, took the role as the doctors for the passengers and began to free people from the seats and tended to the wounds. As nighttime began to fall, the survivors slept in the fuselage, doing all they could to stay alive through the temperatures below minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit. By the next morning, 5 more had died on the first night, leaving only 27 survivors. A series of misfortunate events led to the detrimental plane crash in the Andes, but little did the survivors know they would go to great lengths to survive using teamwork, common sense, and quick decision-making. But how does team effort affect survival in the face of a catastrophe? Without a doubt, that we were a group of friends, a team, and culturally and socially of the same level helped, survivor Carlos Paez said. If it had been an airliner, it would have been very complicated. It would have all been people who didn't know each other. Nando Parado agreed and noted, "The group worked as a team, and their longtime captain, Marcelo Perez, took control and led the group, and according to Nando, much of the credit for our survival in those critical early days must go to Marcelo." By the second day, Marcelo began to ration their food, which consisted of a few nuts, chocolate bars, dried fruit, jam, 3 bottles of wine, some whiskey, and a few bottles of liqueur found in suitcases. This did not come even close to enough food for 27 people, and Nando recollects that each meal was nothing more than a small square of chocolate or a dab of jam washed down with a sip of wine from the cap. After first eating a piece of their dead pilot, Nando reflects that we all knew our fight for survival would be uglier and more harrowing than we had imagined, but I felt that as a group we had made a declaration to the mountain that we would not surrender. Carlos Paez described the human flesh to be sweet and roughly like steak tartare. He also adds that he never felt blame or remorse, as he explained that he believed that the bodies had been detached from their souls, and this was all they could do in order to survive. Along with starvation, the frigid temperatures were also life-threatening, and in order to withstand, they needed to use critical thinking and survival strategies. In order to melt snow for water, they figured out that using metal reflectors, hand-held in the sunlight, created a small trickle of water. They organized a group that would run this process at all times during the day. Even with that, everyone suffered from dehydration because the human body dehydrates 5 times faster at high altitude than at sea level, resulting in nearly $7,500 going up in flames. After enduring 62 days of brutal survival, Nando Parado decided it was time to find civilization beyond the peaks on his own. He picked Roberto Canessa as his companion for the rugged trek. They endured a ruthless 10-day trek through the Arctic Andes. Finally, they reached a small hut across a river in Los Metenos. "I am Uruguayan. In the plane there are still 14 injured people. We don't have any food. We are weak. When are you going to come and fetch us? Please." The shepherd immediately notified the police. After they arrived, "I think that we were very lucky because one of the best things that we did is that we were a team before. Had this happened on a commercial airline, things would have been different." His fellow survivors agree with this, and all credit the closeness and teamwork of the group to their willpower to survive. This historical event will forever be remembered as one of the greatest survival stories in history, and an incredible journey testing 16 people's critical decision-making and will to survive against pain, hunger, and fear.